Endosymbiosis. First one says first karyote. Second one says first multicellular organism, and then the last one says first animal. God, my glasses must rock. Oh shit. Lucy. Lucy's not the oldest anymore. In the tundra here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's true.
Yeah. Kind of gotta redo the DNA thing now. And she had a small container of cannabis.
Really?
Yep. I was following that story very closely because it kind of undoes the cradle of life. I mean, we'll see when they come back with the genetics. I don't know what they've done yet.
It was a fossilized body. It wasn't just some body that is washed up in the cave.
No, it was deep in the tundra. It couldn't have, yeah, it hasn't gone anywhere for at least however many layers of ice they had over it, probably about 50,000 years, I want to say. 35,000 years. I have to look. You can't trust those numbers. I can't remember.
Yeah, she actually ended.
I said BCE.
Oh, yeah.
I guess it's such large amounts of time BCE is irrelevant, huh?
Yeah, no, that's when we're talking more recent times. We use BCE for before the current era.
Yeah.
BCE for current era.
Yeah.
People still use AD and BC, but by the way, that is the newer designation now. They'll use the word BC. BCE.
Before Common Era.
Before the Common Era or current era.
And current era, yeah, you're right.
And they'll use CE.
Common Era. But we got rid of Anno Domini.
Well, the AD and BC, of course, is a religious thing.
Yeah, I know.
And if you go around the world, there's so many different numbering systems depending upon.
Yeah, if you're Hebrew, it's way different here. Chinese, yeah.
Or Islam. I mean,
Yeah,
they all
yeah.
have their own
Calendar,
system where they start.
yeah.
So now most historians and all that are using that BCE for before the Common Era and CE for the Common Era. But then we're not. I mean, I'm not worried about those terms. I just think you mentioned it, I thought I'd say it.
Hmm.
But remember, I was using things like MYA for million years ago, so and BYA for billion years ago. And all
yeah.
that. And we were talking about this last time in terms of the.
Oh shoot. Okay, it started.
I'll say a little bit about this. I think I said something. I can't remember. I might have said it slightly incorrectly. That's what I usually say. But whatever. By the way, anyone that wasn't here last time, I have a copy of the study guide for the lecture in there. The final exam. You gonna need that? Okay. So is this a study guide for the final exam? Okay. Is one or both of them? Let's do that thing. Okay, so before I start, then we just remind you the final is officially what I had on the original handout way back. Oh God, the original first lecture was so long ago now. I can't remember back that far. Anyway, I had this date because I had made that up for my other lecture section. Was after I'd made up that study thing that the lecture schedule and all that they gave me this lecture section to teach, and officially the final exam for this lecture is Monday, 3 weeks from the previous Monday, May 12th, 10:45 and 12:45 here. I did say, as long as you don't publicize it, that if you are desperate to wait to take the exam, you could take it on the time I'm giving to my other lecture section, which is Wednesday, May 14th from 1 to 3. And I don't really care which one you take it, the time you take it. And I'm going to tell my other lecture section if they want to get it done early, they can come on Monday instead of waiting till Wednesday. But I would rather, for your sake, since you have other classes that you study, take it and do well on it, whichever time you take it. But I'm not worried about when you take it, as long as you take it, of course. That's obvious.
When's the study session?
Oh, so we will do a study session.
That's all anybody's going to care about on the video anyway.
What day would that be? That'd be what, 12, so it'd be what, 3 days before that, 9?
Okay.
So we can do a study session on Friday.
May 9.
Friday, May 9. Yeah, we can just do it here, I'm sure. I'll check and make sure that I reserve the room, but I mean, nothing's happening. And remember that, this week, and then 2 more weeks of lectures after this. And then we're done with lectures. Then there's finals week. There are no lectures on final week. No labs on finals week. So just finals.
We have a lab final though.
Now, when I was a student, just to tell you this is Berkeley in the 60s. That was definitely a place that they were trying to weed people out. And I talked to you about this. It's not my intention to weed people out. I'm trying to get people to learn these things and do well and succeed. But, that wasn't the way it was in Berkeley in those days. You may have heard of the free speech movement and all that, and that was partly a reaction to the attitude they had towards undergraduates at Berkeley. It wasn't necessarily what's the word I was going to start saying? Nutritional. That's not the word I was trying. Nurturing. That's the word I was trying to say. It wasn't necessarily a nurturing environment for undergraduates. But I just remembered. I think I may have told you this story already in class. But just one day, in finals, they were 3 hours long, and you were petrified taking your finals, especially when you were a fairly young student, new student, And I remember. I'll get to the question in a second. I remember one time going to this one final. And it was actually not a terribly big class for Berkeley. It was only like 65 students. It was an upper division physiology class. And This one kid that he was always there. He always sat in the front. He was always there. He wasn't in the final. And I go, wow, that's kind of strange. What would happen? He came to every lecture and he came to the final. I think I may have told you this story.
No.
But okay. But anyway, so I started taking the final, and about 30 minutes later, I look up. I hear the door open. I look up. Here he came in. This guy, he's bleeding on his face. He'd been in I think he rode a bicycle or a motorcycle or whatever. He got in an accident, and here he was bleeding all there. And he showed up to his lecture. He didn't miss the lecture. I mean, the exam. Showed up to the final exam, I meant to say. And he goes in. The professor goes, "Oh my God, dude, go to the hospital. Take care of that. We'll worry about the exam later." But I mean, he showed up with blood all dripping down. Oh my God! But that just shows you how intense it was. I'm not quite that intense. If you get in an accident, just call me. Communicate. That is the important word. It's easier to communicate now with cell phones. But if there is a problem, obviously contact me. But otherwise, I expect you to be here if there's no serious problem, because there's no other time to take it. This is finals. This is it. Rachel.
How long do the study sessions usually last? If they're starting at 11?
Hour and a half.
11:30?
Hour and a half.
Yes, it's been an hour and 45 minutes.
I think the last was 2 hours, wasn't it, or something?
It was
like that?
hour 45 minutes.
Steve's always there taking the
Yeah.
pictures. But and if you can't be there, you could give some questions that you have.
Yeah, you can even
email them.
email
the
questions.
night before to me, so I can answer them. For
But
sure.
I
And again,
it's
as
better if
usual-
people show up and ask the questions themselves.
Yeah, it's easier to be there and hear it. But as usual, as I said, I told you this, and several people are taking advantage. If you want to write out answers to questions, write them out, email them to me, and I'll look at it ahead of time, and tell you what's missing or what's good or something like that.
Oh, that's
I know
cool.
quite a few of you. And it works out fine. Anyway, any other questions? Let me just finish on a few things. A lot of these things are just when various things have shown up in the fossil record. I don't expect you to memorize these dates. I don't memorize these dates. That's not really the point. I'm just trying to give you a little feeling for what has happened over these last, the age of the Earth is about 4.6 billion years, and somehow in that first billion years, some life form started that was self-replicating, and all kinds of things happened. The one big thing and I'd like you to kind of remember this idea, is endosymbiosis. We talked about this just at the end of last lecture, did we not, as I recall? Did we get to it? I thought we did. We did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But I'll remind you of what it is. The endosymbiosis refers to when some presumably large fermenting kind of cell engulfed like an aerobic bacterium, which then eventually, instead of killing it and all that, they formed the symbiotic association, which eventually led to what we call mitochondria, right? So that bacterium evolved into what are now mitochondria, and all eukaryotic cells have mitochondria, and they're all pretty much interrelated to each other, and presumably they all originate from some common aerobic bacterium from way back. We're already a long time ago. So endosymbiosis.
Primordial ooze.
So in one case, we had an aerobic bacterium engulfed, and they became, not right away, might have taken 100,000 years before we would have said they're like modern day mitochondria. Maybe it was shorter than that, maybe longer, I don't know. Nobody knows. And I did mention to you that there is one particular aerobic bacterium whose Krebs cycle enzymes, whose electron transfer system and everything, they are so similar to the mitochondrial enzymes. So it's kind of wild. Yeah.
What do you mean by the anaerobic bacteria engulfed?
Yeah.
Engulfed itself?
I said aerobic bacteria. It was engulfed. I want to make this clear. It was engulfed. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, sure, it was engulfed.
Through the membrane?
It was engulfed, and I should have said I'm sorry I didn't make this clear. By a fermenting cell. And I'll show you what happens, what they think.
Through
fermenting by a fermenting
biolayer.
Bacteria. By a fermenting cell, not a bacteria, just some larger cell, not a bacteria. Sorry. An aerobic bacterium was engulfed by a fermenting cell. Large cell. Bacteria pretty small. And so this cell presumably was large. Here's what they think happened, and I'm not going to ask you this part, but it's a good question, and I'm kind of glad you asked. So here was the cell here, and here was this aerobic bacterium, and you know, it looked fairly tasty. So that this little cell right here decided it was going to eat it, and how does it eat things? It engulfs them and puts them in little packets, you know. Well, if it engulfed this, it's going to do well. I'll try to make it simple. It'll kind of like, actually not like that, but sorry, kind of like this. Do it like that. That still isn't quite the way I wanted to do it. Let's see which one. Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it like this. It's going to be like this. It's going to engulf it like this. This is going to be a little better picture now. It's going to engulf it like this.
Yeah.
The next picture, it would end up. I mean, eventually, I'm not going to.
It'll have its.
It'll end up like this. With that bacterium enclosed in a little membranous structure.
Yeah, that's
So the thing is that mitochondria have two membranes. They have two membranes. It's got an outer membrane and an inner membrane. What they think happened was the outer membrane originally came from the cell that engulfed it, and the inner membrane was its own membrane. That's what they think. You know, a plausible thing. Again, nothing we can prove. All we're talking about is what's plausible. And as I said, in doing experiments on the bacteria, that one particular bacterium, all those enzymes and everything is so similar between our mitochondria and that particular bacterium. This is kind of amazing. But it's been what, 2 billion years now.
And the type of
so you know, those mitochondria really cannot live by themselves for longer than several hours. And if you take all the mitochondria out of our cells, or any eukaryotic cell, those cells can only survive for a few hours. Really, they need each other now. They form this necessary symbiotic relationship.
So the type of cell that did engulf what became mitochondria no longer exists, right?
Well, who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe still is around as some protozoan or something like that.
Well, yeah,
not a protozoan, but you're saying this cell before it engulfed it. Probably not, but it might have gotten eaten. It probably was out competed.
Yeah, that's how I was thinking. It doesn't seem like it'd still be there.
Now, the same idea for this endosymbiosis was that presumably something that already engulfed the mitochondria. So a cell that had already engulfed the mitochondria, or that already had engulfed that aerobic bacterium, which became a mitochondria. A cell that, say, already engulfed anaerobic bacteria. Now engulfed some, who knows? I say now, but who knows how many millions of years it would have been. Now engulfed a blue-green bacteria. And again, not killing it, they survived and they became dependent upon each other. And why is that such a good thing? What do blue-greens do? Photosynthesize, and they give off oxygen. Yes. And so that blue-green then developed into what we now have called chloroplasts. So this is, and again, there is one particular blue-green whose all its not Krebs cycle, the Calvin cycle enzymes and the electron transfer system are so similar to chloroplasts that they think that it, or some relative of it from a couple billion years ago, maybe the original free living blue-green is now chloroplasts. And again, chloroplasts don't really survive on their own. Plant cells and algae and all these, they all need each other now. It's absolutely necessary.
So are you saying that plant cells have mitochondria?
Oh, yes. Because all eukaryotic cells have mitochondria, right? But plant cells and algae and a few protozoa and a few other things have chloroplasts also. But remember just from the short lecture I gave on photosynthesis, real quick one. The plant uses photosynthesis to make its sugars. When it wants energy to grow and divide or something, it uses those sugars and its mitochondria to break them down. Yeah. Does it again?
Where it says that already goes in aerobic.
And aerobic.
And aerobic.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
That one is the one that's taking mitochondria.
Yeah, yes, well, no, so yeah, the one that presumably became, I didn't put a mitochondria, but maybe you could call it a mitochondrion already. I mean, it's when did that become what we would now call a mitochondria? I don't know. I mean, we're talking a long time ago. We don't have evidence exactly for it. We can only look at what we have now and then hypothesize back according to what.
That's why they're trying to do the experiments and recreate the conditions of the early.
And this theory, this endosymbiotic theory, is relatively new theory. I mean, relatively new, maybe 30, 40 years old. Same thing with things like Flagella and stuff like that. Where those originate. There are various ideas about it. I'm not going to get into all that. But it's kind of wild because we take what life is like now. We look at the fossil record. Okay, well, these things don't go fossilized.
Inside the same life.
Again, look at things that are similar and go, oh, hey, here's some interesting ideas. This is maybe what happened. Anyway, it's not that I want you to understand about this endosymbiotic theory because it's kind of a neat idea. And as I said to you before, one of the things I like about it is it shows how interdependent all life is on Earth. We somehow think we're above everything. We're not above everything. We're part of the biosphere. Unfortunately, a fairly destructive part of the biosphere these days, but we are part of the biosphere, and we couldn't possibly live without our mitochondria. And remember how you get new mitochondria. They're single cell. They're the size of bacteria. They have their own little circular chromosome. Just like bacteria, one circular chromosome. They have ribosomes that are like bacterial ribosomes, not like eukaryotic ribosomes. And so and we get new mitochondria in our cells by having them grow and divide. Grow and divide, grow and divide. In other words, if you really go out and exercise and in your muscles, there's going to be a signal to the mitochondria to increase in number. So you can handle more oxygen and do more exercising. But they grow and divide just like bacteria. They don't. And if you, as I said, if you remove the mitochondria from a cell, that cell can't get new mitochondria. You have to have more there. Anyway, interesting. I think it's wild stuff. In terms of when did these things show up, and let's just put some dates down again, not to be memorized. And I think I said something. I don't know if I put a date down for multicellulars, but I'm going to give you a little better date.
You could have wet that though.
The first eukaryotes showed up around, about 2 billion years ago. Okay, so BYA again for billion years ago. And the first multicellular organisms about 1.2 billion years ago. So in other words, maybe. I mean, these are rough numbers, but maybe for well over 500 million years, we just had single cell eukaryotes, like protozoa, like amoebas, those kinds of things, single cells. But somehow they started getting together, maybe a little over a billion years ago, forming multicellular organisms, which then developed into what we now think of as plants and animals. I don't think I have a thing for first animals, plants. But the first animals I have about 575 million years ago. The first animals show up in the sea, obviously not on land, about 575 million years ago. So, and plants before that.
Was there prokaryotes before, or?
Oh yeah, but remember that all these before eukaryotes, they would all be what we would think of as prokaryotic or precursors to the modern bacteria or blue greens. But still, they did have blue greens. They had blue greens and probably a lot of them.
So
probably
most life.
A lot of the bacteria that are around today were in existence then, there has been evolution among all organisms, you know. Okay, so but let me say something about this. Is sort of interesting. So roughly, most animals show off that we can determine from fossil records about 575 million years ago. Now these are not vertebrates. I mean these are soft-bodied animals and all that. So it's hard to get very many samples of them in the fossil record because they don't fossilize easily, as we talked about last time. But we do have some, and they date back to it like that. What was interesting is what they call the Cambrian explosion. Again, I'm not going to ask you anything about it, but it is just interesting. And if you do any reading, you will read about this Cambrian explosion. And this was about, it's in the seas, again, in the water environment, from about 542 million years ago. So, about 575 million years ago, animals presumably started showing up. Okay, another, say, 30 million years, and then there was just this huge, development of all kinds of animals. And when they say the Cambrian explosion, it's just this big diversity of animals. So we'll say many animals formed. And I don't mean all at once, but I mean they just started forming and moving to different areas and changing and developing. But huge numbers, and it may have been longer ago than that. This is the dates I give you are obviously not fixed dates. But these are just approximations, and some people think, oh, we're going longer ago than that. But certainly in the fossil record, there's this huge increase in all the number of animals that they can find. And so it seemed like there was just maybe a wealth of habitats, presumably, and you have animals that can move. Most animals can move, so they can move into them, and then they can start developing and increasing in numbers, and new habitats. There's some changes, and so new species develop. Again, over periods of millions of years, not just immediately. Yeah.
Well, so they think that. Why do they think that it happened? The Cambrian explosion?
Why do they think? That's a good question, and I can't say why. Part of it is this, and I was going to give. I don't know if I had numbers here. I was going to give some numbers on oxygen. The blue-greens. Okay, so the blue-greens developed, about they developed before this. The blue-greens developed about 2.7 billion years ago, and they're starting to produce oxygen
into the environment. Yeah.
But the amount of oxygen available was by 2.4 billion. So after 0.3 billion years, there's enough oxygen that you say, hey, that's a reasonable amount. So then aerobic organisms, if you got some changes that allowed them to use oxygen, then they could start developing. Okay. But in terms of the actual amount of oxygen in the air and the atmosphere, it wasn't that much until, they think till about 600 million years ago, so a little before this.
Is it possible that part of the reason that we saw more is because they were more easily fossilized?
Well, I mean,
That's
partly yes,
yes.
Partly we do see them because there are but partly it's because there are more of them, and so they're that you find them more often. Again, it's all chance. I mean, everything is chance. Whether something's going to fossilize or not, or just be trapped in a way that's going to be preserved. But yeah, part of it was that they had a lot of them had the hard body skeleton. Not I don't mean skeleton, but I mean like shells, like bivalves or something, tough shells that would survive and all that. And part of it's just numbers. And again, what I'm trying to say is, by about 600 million years ago, the amount of oxygen in the air reached about the proportion that we have now. Which gives all these animals, which need oxygen, the ability to do more. Whereas before that, there wasn't as much. The amount of oxygen was going up and up and up, but still, there wasn't a lot. So I think it's a combination of several things. Yeah.
I mean, I'd heard when I'd heard about the Cambrian explosion, the idea behind it was that the oxygen became available about 600,000 years when they started producing it, and then about 60 million years later, the conditions became optimal for all sorts of life.
For all kinds.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that in the oceans, or lakes for that matter, oxygen is not terribly soluble. And so So if you go very deep in the ocean, the amount of oxygen drops real fast. But the higher the amount in the air, the more that will be soluble. So the animals because you can go down in the ocean a ways down, and they'll call it a desert, and you go a desert, but you think of a desert, but they mean a desert. With respect to life forms, there aren't as many because there isn't very much oxygen. There are things that, as you go down. Anyway, so this is just all I'm trying to do is give you an idea here, and I don't tell you everything. What I was going to say, here, just for interest sake, about 500 million years ago. This is all, everything's in the oceans, essentially, oceans and lakes and rivers and all that. But about
Pond scum.
500 million years ago, say roughly, 500 million years ago, the first organisms started growing on land. And these were plants, actually plant fungi combinations. On land. And what they think happened is this, that plants developed from one of the green algae. I don't know how many varieties of green algae there are, but they think that the modern plants developed from green algae. And they think that, there were various algae in all these, there are all kinds of different algae with different colors, and they live at different levels because of the different wavelengths of light that can come down, but they all photosynthesize. And they think that some of the algae would be where they would sometimes be in water and sometimes be out of water. And over time, some of them develop the ability to be out of water longer and not die off. And they think that some of those eventually developed into what we now call plants. And some of the fungi sort of developed too. By the way, in the future, when we talk about this, you'll see that most plants have some necessary relationship with fungi. It's a very common kind of thing. We'll come back to that not right now.
A relationship with. I understand.
Say it again.
You mean a relationship with some?
Symbiotic type relationship.
Yeah, like the way they do grapes and stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm thinking like in terms of with their roots, so they can.
Biologicals in the soil. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying.
Things and all that. Yeah, but anyway.
Protozoa.
Now, so they think so roughly they're saying maybe 500 million years ago, plants started to invade the land. Maybe 20 million years or so after that, then animals started to invade the land. So maybe say 20 million years later. Animals started invaded the land, and presumably most of these were animals that spent part of the time in water and part of the time out. And there are still animals that do that. Some lungfish. You've probably heard of the lungfish. They can breathe underwater. They can breathe above water. So anyway, so this just kind of gives you an idea that. So animals. Okay, so animals. That's 500 million years ago. Roughly, that animals started invading land, and we're not talking large animals. They're slowly developing. Well, okay, let's talk. I know what I want to say before I get into the lecture today, which is human evolution, which is kind of neat. Is how did all this start? Well, of course, nobody knows. But what's neat is, as I said before, in science, if you can ask the right question, you might be able to get the answer. So people started hypothesizing in a sophisticated way. Now, and I say in a sophisticated way, meaning chemistry and physics and all that. How did life start? And one of the first really good experiments was back in 1953. A famous person actually got the Nobel Prize for his work, named Stanley Miller. And he and some others were working. He was working with this other famous chemist, and they were trying to hypothesize what was the early atmosphere like? What were the early conditions like in the universe? Or not in the universe, sorry, I'm talking about Earth, sorry, just the Earth. So they hypothesized this, and so they figured, Miller and Urey, these are the two guys, they hypothesized that maybe, so this is 1953. 1953, they hypothesized that the early atmosphere, no, they hypothesized this for various reasons. Atmosphere, here we go. For various reasons, they hypothesized that there was probably water vapor, methane,
Yeah, then
ammonia, and hydrogen. Plus, okay, so they said this is what they hypothesized the early environment had. And they said, okay, what if you had this early environment? And of course, you had water, you had the oceans, right? This is well after the Earth had formed, and it cooled enough that the water could be in the form of liquid as opposed to gas. But still, the air, you didn't have oxygen there. You might have had some CO2, but you had a lot of methane and stuff like that. They hypothesized that maybe these were the gases that were there. Then what kind of energy sources? Well, you probably had a lot of lightning, because all kinds of clouds and lightning, probably all kinds of radioactivity. But they used lightning. They didn't use lightning, but they used electric spark to simulate lightning.
now they're
So they had this. Everything had to be totally sterile. So they had totally sterile conditions. They had a container, a small little container. They had water at the bottom of the container. Again, everything had to be totally sterile. And so then they put these gases in there, and then they had it arranged so that they could get these little electric sparks to come in, going through this atmosphere. And they just said, let's just see what happens. They had no idea what happened. Well, after several days, the water turned dark brown. You go, whoa, there's all kinds of things happening. They had no idea. So then they took the stuff out. Again, you have to be super careful because you don't want to contaminate stuff from the air because that would totally mess up your results. So you have to be very careful. But they take samples of the stuff and they tested it. And this was, as I say, only several days, maybe a week or two at the most. And what they found when they did all this, they found amino acids, several amino acids. I can't remember how many they found, 3 or 4 or 5, something like that.
That's enough.
And they go, oh my God, this is incredible. Because just hypothesizing what might be the original conditions and giving some energy source, we were able to create randomly some amino acids. Well, what are amino acids used for, you guys?
Build protein.
To make proteins, yes.
Yes.
All right. Other people hypothesize slightly different atmospheres and slightly different energy sources, maybe radiation, maybe just high temperature, whatever.
Yeah.
They were able to produce things like sugars, and some could produce nucleotides. So suddenly, instead of suddenly thinking, what people had thought is formation of life would be very difficult, suddenly they're going, wait a minute, it is plausible. It is plausible that we could. This isn't life, forming amino acids and forming nucleotides. That's certainly not life, but these are molecules that are used in life forms on this planet. And so then people have done experiments where they'll take random nucleotides and do some things to get them to hook together randomly, especially RNA kinds of nucleotides. And they've gotten RNAs that have some enzymatic activity. Now that sounds a little strange. You're going, wait a minute. I thought enzymes were all proteins. Well, that's what I sort of told you. I said, for practical purposes, I'll say that enzymes are all proteins. But there are some RNA molecules that have some enzymatic capabilities. They're called ribozymes. And they occur in all our cells, and they're used for various processes, usually dealing with something to do with making proteins. But anyway, the point is that just making some random mixtures of RNA nucleotides, they got some RNA molecules that could actually have some things like enzymatic activity over there. And keep in mind, we're only talking about doing an experiment over a period of maybe a few weeks. How long was the experiment going on our Earth?
4.6
millions of years. And so, it becomes plausible. We can't give the details. We don't know the time. We don't know how it happened. It becomes plausible that you have all these things. You have what remember I called it the organic soup or the
primordial ooze.
Or the primordial ooze or whatever you want to call it. But if you think about it, with all these different energy sources, all these different things in the atmosphere that might be there, if you could produce randomly a bunch of amino acids and a bunch of
Glucose.
things could get together and actually form some molecules. Some people have hypothesized one very important aspect might be clay, because certain clays have an affinity for some nucleic acids. And so they think that maybe some of the nucleic acids could hook onto clays. And somehow, again, these are big, huge time things that we can't really explain, but they could develop some ability to self-replicate. And again, time. That's the hardest thing for us to realize. But given enough time, you can imagine that maybe some self-replicating molecules could form. Of course, what would a self-replicating molecule want to do? It'd like to replicate and replicate and replicate. But if somehow there were a bunch of lipids and things like that, and maybe even some phospholipids or something that kind of formed together and they kind of surrounded this self-replicating molecule, then you could maybe have some really primordial cell. Anyway, who knows?
Have they ever come up with fatty acids? Because that's what.
Well, probably. I can't tell you because I haven't followed the whole.
Yeah. That's enough to know what we need to know.
But it's really impressive to think about all these things that might have happened. And what I think is so amazing is just that just in a few days, maybe a week.
Yeah, that's
terribly
impressive. Yeah.
When you think, God, in terms of life forming, we had millions and billions of years actually. All right, let's change topics and talk about human evolution. There's tons of details on this. I can only give you some of the detail. I don't want to give a whole lot. Because if you look in books, they'll go into more and more details. And it changes fairly fast because every time they find some new skeleton, they want to put it into the scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And any scheme that you see is somebody's interpretation, and who knows?
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'll talk about Lucy, and we kind of think that her kinds of people were precursors to modern humans. We're not certain. We ain't certain about this, but for reasons we think. But anyway, let's stop for a second and let's go just think about this. 1856. That's only 150 years ago. That's not that.
Just before the Civil War.
The first Neanderthal skeleton was discovered. Now, by the way, it's in this valley in Germany, Neanderthal. So, most of the time I'll say Neanderthal with a TH because that's the way we say TH in English. But in German they would pronounce it like a T, Neanderthal. But I'll usually say Neanderthal just so it's easier. But anyway, they discovered this skeleton, which wasn't a modern human, but it certainly wasn't a gorilla or chimp or anything else. And mind you, that things like gorillas and stuff like that, they weren't, they hadn't been that well studied in Europe because they lived in Africa.
Yeah.
But still, nonetheless, they find the skeleton and they go, whoa, something's different about this. And so that was the first inkling that anyone had that there were prior forms of what looked like humans, like modern humans. And it's enough like a modern human that it's not like that it's so much closer to us than an ape, but it's not quite the same as modern humans. So then people started, looking for them. The majority of the skeletons, of course, have been found in Africa because they think that that's where human evolution really started and radiated out. People moved out into Europe and then into Asia. But still, they found skeletons in Asia. They found skeletons, most of the Neanderthal skeletons they found in Europe, and they think that they may have actually developed in Europe from some predecessors, or they may have moved from Africa to Europe, and they just haven't found any skeletons on the way. You know what I'm saying? Again,
they found one more than a few years ago now. They found one in the tundra in Canada. Outdates.
Seriously, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't read about that one.
Oh, really?
No,
it was in the news. Really?
I don't know. What do I know? Anyway, but that would be a good one.
No.
And I want to talk about the Hobbit people too, if I can.
Oh.
But anyway, so people started to look for them, and of course, there's huge group of people all over the world trying to find more and more proto-humans, whatever term you want to use for them. And then once you find them, try to fit them into some category. Keep in mind that when you're talking evolution of anything, whether it's humans or anything else, it's a branching bush. It's not just a straight line, boom, boom, boom. I mean, obviously, if you could figure it out, there would be a straight line from some proto-human to humans, yes. But in the process, there are all kinds of other branches coming off, most of which have become extinct. So, it's not a simple process. So, yes, there would be a straight line from some, maybe Lucy up, to us or something like that. But we can't just see that. That's not so easy. And we see all these different forms, and we try to put them into some kind of pattern. I'm not going to try to give you that pattern because there's no way. It changes fast, and you'd have to talk to someone who really deals with this to keep track of all of it. All I want to do is kind of give you a feeling for some of these things. We now call this group the hominini, and they call this a taxon. They call it. But let me just tell you what that means. The hominini. Hominini. Oh no, they spell with an I. Sorry, hominini. These are human-like. Human-like. When I say human, I mean modern human. Human-like primates.
Bless you.
Now, keep in mind that we're talking about human-like as opposed to chimp and gorilla-like. And we're very closely related to chimps. But the separation from the hominini and chimps was about 7 million years ago. Okay, so the last common ancestor between chimps and hominini was 6 to 7 million years. I like to use the term 77, but doesn't, there's no exact date. So I'll put this down that the split between chimps and the hominini. Hominini is about 7 million years. So in other words, the hominini have been evolving for 7 million years, eventually to become what we call ourselves modern humans.
So they're similar to chimps, though, and that's why they say the split.
Well, no, the early hominini would be very similar to chimps.
Chimps, okay, that's what I'm asking.
Then the next, the next set of, evolutionary
Be
changes
further away,
less
gene pool changes.
Again, the DNA, as I said, we share 98 to 99% of our DNA with bonobos. But still, there are enough differences, and some of those differences probably have to do with regulatory genes and some of these other things. So it doesn't have to be too many gene differences that could still make a fairly large difference in behavior or
appearance,
physiognomy or whatever. Anyway, but now without going into all kinds of details, because there's no way I can. There's way too many. It seems that these hominini started to develop, and you can look in any book, the book that came with this class, or any other book, and they'll show you pictures and all that, give you approximations. They love it when they find skeletons, because then that can give them a good idea of the size of the animal, whether they walked upright or whether they walked on fours. Keep in mind that chimps and gorillas can walk upright. But most of the time they do knuckle walking with their front hands. They're standing up on their back legs, but they do knuckle walking, and so they're not exactly for walking on all fours, but they're not walking on all twos. They're walking a combination of two. That's kind of what football players do too, isn't it?
Right.
When they're on the line. Anyway, I don't know. I'm kidding any of you guys who play football. It's just a joke. No, but anyway, the point is that but looking at the skeleton, you can determine whether or not they're upright or whatever. So when Lucy was discovered, I have a year when she was discovered. I don't know if I have the year, but when she was discovered is about the 70s, or I think the early 70s, if I remember. I forget when she was discovered. that was a big deal because she was almost a complete skeleton. Since then, they found the other skeletons not quite as complete as she was. But it's hard to find complete skeletons. You know, you might find a part of a skull, you might find some teeth, you might find part of an arm or a leg, you know, but finding a complete skeleton is a big deal. So Lucy, these are what they think. They call her Lucy, and the guy who found her, Robert Johansen, he named her that, as I recall, because the Beatles song "Lucy
in the Sky with Diamonds"
was popular at the time. So he named her Lucy. They classify her as Australopithecus afarensis.
Yeah.
It's a fancy-looking word, but it's not that hard. Australopithecus afarensis.
You're not going to remember that word.
No.
Oh, come on, put it on the test.
My point is kind of give you a feeling for how it all happens, but no, there's so many details, and I'm just touching on a few of the details.
It's not that hard of a word.
The Afar region of Ethiopia is where they found a huge number of these skeletons. It just happens to be an area that was, for some reason, you know, all kinds of fossils have been able to be preserved, and they've been opened up enough that you can go in and find them and all that. So that's what the afarensis is from. Australo refers to southern. So and Pithecus refers to ape, so it's the southern ape from the Afar region, essentially. Now, it's not an ape, it's a hominin. You know, it's a proto-human, if you want to think of it that way. Just for interest's sake, she was bipedal, and it was a female. You can tell males from females. Did you know you can tell males from females? Anyway, skeletal remains.
How?
You can tell males from females. A couple of things. One is the skull, the other is the pelvis, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as female, she was, they think that she lived about, you know, the skeletons are from about, I'll say lived about 3.18 million years ago, okay? She was bipedal, so she walked upright, but they think that she, from various things on her feet, that she probably still climbed trees, okay? So she probably did both. You know, they think that maybe she, one of that group of people, you know, went in the ground and hunted and all that, but at night they get in the trees to maybe stay away from predators. She was short. I forget the height. I don't have it written down, but it's like 5'2" or something. I forget what it was. Maybe shorter than 4'8", 4. Anyway, short, long arms, short legs, but feet that could grasp. Okay, so that's why they think that she probably climbed trees. Her brain size, about 450 cubic centimeters. Now that's about the same as chimps. So, you know, she's not too much bigger than the chimps, okay? But she's different. I mean, she's definitely not a chimp. She's some kind of a hominid. Megan or somebody had a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, did you ever read about the aquatic evolution theory?
Oh, aquatic. I haven't actually read about it, but I know a tiny.
So they talk about how when monkeys walk through water, they walk on their hind legs.
Right.
And the animals that spend a lot of time in water use their body hair. So at some point, humans spent some time in water, so we lost all our body hair. That's how we became bipedal. That's how we got like better neural connections from the fish oil.
We ate the fish, and that's good, healthy food for your brain. Yeah, no, it's, you know, and it's not an unreasonable idea. I mean, you know,
omega-3 fatty acids.
I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
At some point, we lost our body hair for some reason.
Right. Some of us lost more than others.
Don't you think that could have been environmental though? I mean, like that's the way it works for most animals. If they didn't need the hair, they didn't have it.
I mean, certainly.
In Africa, it's pretty hot.
The hot area, maybe it would be better to cool off. I mean, yeah, you know, who knows? Yeah. I do. I don't know if you do or not. You don't have to.
Oh, obviously we're different organisms.
Well, yeah.
We might have similar traits and features.
Incredibly similar traits and features.
Come from monkeys. It's ridiculous.
You know, you're saying exactly what people. And you're saying exactly what people said. You know, when Darwin first presented this.
It's not popular to compare us to that because they didn't know where we came from.
Well, you know, but see, these, you know, these were when Darwin presented his ideas, and he wrote a book called The Descent of Man, and there were all kinds of people who were really upset about it. One of the most famous ones who was very upset about it was Bishop Wilberforce. He was a bishop of the church. He was a very bright man. He was an excellent speaker, and at one time he had a debate with a good friend of Darwin. Darwin was kind of sickly, so he didn't do the debating, but this other guy did. His name was Huxley, and they often call him Darwin's bulldog because Huxley defended Darwinism and all that. But keep in mind, most everyone was very religious, and Darwin knew that his ideas would just. Well, no, I know, but it's okay. I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying that you're still saying similar things to what the people said, and most of them were saying it on a religious basis. And I have to tell you
Well,
this
I just
one.
think that there's no other ideas that ever challenge the fact that we obviously didn't come from them.
Well,
We might have similar structures, but most life forms will have similar structures.
but it doesn't have to. See, it wouldn't have to unless. Well, let's put it this way. As one person stated, nothing in biology makes sense except from the ideas of evolution. If you understand the ideas of evolution, then everything fits into some kind of pattern that makes sense. Otherwise, it's just random. And if it's going to be random, then I don't think we would share all these same processes with bacteria that we share or with protozoa. You know what I'm saying? So, but I'm not saying you have to believe it. You can believe whatever you want. But I still want to give you the quote from what Bishop Wilberforce was having a big debate with Huxley. And Bishop Wilberforce was a very famous bishop, a very bright guy, and a good debater. And he just started mocking Huxley's Darwin's ideas, but as presented by Huxley, and he just goes. It went towards the end of the debate. He just goes, well, just tell me, Mr. Huxley. He says, do you trace your chimp ancestry through your mom or your dad? And he was just mocking him, you know. And Huxley just looked at him and said, you know, we have this incredible brain that we can use for good purposes and to use good reasoning power. And if you're going to, just sit and use your brain for mocking, he says, I would rather think of myself as related to an ape than related to you.
Yeah, actually.
So Wilberforce was kind of put down a little bit. But it didn't stop his opposition to the idea. And the thing is, the whole idea, I don't care what anyone believes. It doesn't matter to me a bit. But I want you to understand what is the common ideas in the field of human evolution. So, and I do think that the Australopithecus afarensis was probably a precursor to, probably on the line to humans. But there were two lines. One line was a very robust kind of individual. Lucy line was fairly slender, fairly small as an individual. There was another one. I don't remember what the genus was, but Boisei was the name of the species, I think. Really robust, huge, strong bones, giant muscles. That group seems to have died out several million years ago. Who knows if that had been the one surviving? Maybe today, well, we wouldn't be here necessarily. Anyway.
We would just be a bigger classroom.
We'd be certainly different. We'd be a different classroom, yes. They think that the Australopithecus afarensis probably gave rise to what they call a Homo ergaster. And I'm not going to go into all these things because I don't know enough about each of these to say.
The genealogy of man.
About 1.6 million years ago. And the Homo ergaster, so this is quite a bit later. See, I mean, we're talking another 1.5 million years or so. Actually, 1.5 million years later. This is supposed to be ergaster, by the way. Now, what was the question? Which one? Homo and ergaster?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's supposed to be genus species. Yes. Yeah. But it's supposed to be ergaster. The gaster usually refers to gut, but someone, but I'm not sure what. I can't remember the word it means offhand. But anyway, the Homo ergaster skeletons they've found are tall. They're like 6 feet tall. Oh, I didn't finish on the brain size, by the way. Let me go back. You don't have to write all these things down. I don't memorize them. I don't expect you to. But Lucy's brain was about 450 cubic centimeters, which is about chimp size. Our brain size, on the average, is about 1,400. So 3 times.
Yeah, she had a third.
Bigger than Australopithecus afarensis. The Homo ergaster was about tall, roughly say 6 feet tall. The brain was about half the size, instead of being only a third the size, maybe half the size of modern humans. They made tools. And that's a big deal, making tools.
Why didn't they get a name like Lucy?
Whoever founded it, they named it, but
That
Australopithecus afarensis is the proper designation. It's just that Don Johansen, who found it, named the skeleton Lucy.
Yeah, it was right after Sergeant Pepper's came out in '68.
And so everyone refers to it as Lucy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
But,
I think Sergeant Pepper's.
I don't know what her friends and neighbors called her. You know what I mean? Anyway, so Homo ergaster now has a brain size about half human size. They're much bigger. They're making tools. Tools is a big deal. And then at some point, these gave rise to Homo erectus. And these, let's see, and I don't have the exact date on here, and I think these probably overlapped in terms of dates. But these moved out of Africa. Not all of them. I mean, some migrated out of Africa. So some moved out of Africa. And that's kind of a big deal, because suddenly we're getting a much more dispersion of these individuals. Now, let's stop for just a second. I want to come back to some of the, like Homo neanderthalensis. Let's talk about the Neanderthal in just a minute. But let me give you a couple of things before we do this that led to modern humans, or led to the hominids. I had a nice little thing here, but I can't find it now. Well, here we are. So let's talk about 3 changes, and we're talking starting way back. This isn't just right now, but here I'm giving you. Oh, and then we'll say that these led to. I'll wait on that. Let's just wait. I was going to say I will write it down. Modern humans and Neanderthals and stuff. So let's wait. 3 changes that lead to modern humans. Or, yeah, let's just say that. Because this is kind of the important thing. And this is the kind of thing that they can see in the fossil record. This, kind of makes sense. So, starting about 4 million years ago, change in bones to become upright. So somewhere leading to Lucy. Upright stature. I mentioned that she is upright. Okay. So change in bone structure, especially things like hips and all that, leading to upright posture. Now, why is that a big deal? And this is the kind of thing I want you to think about. Why is this a big deal? Go ahead.
The change in bones and actually upright.
Well, here's just the main thing I want you to think of. What's the big deal about upright posture? Why is
it actually had something to do. I understood from what I've seen and read to do with reproduction.
Well, okay, but think. I just want you to think of this. Free hands.
Okay.
You can carry your baby and hold it right next to you. Okay, that's one thing.
Yeah.
You can make tools. You can throw weapons. You can make tools. But you can do this because you've got free hands, and if they become nice and flexible, then you can do whatever it is. And as I said, the Homo ergaster made tools. That's a big deal, tool making. Okay. Let's do number 2. About 3 million years ago, this is the 2 branches. Okay, this is the, the 2 branches. I mentioned the 1 branch. One is the robust, and they died out. And then the other, the lighter build. I'm sorry, say it again.
2 branches of what?
2 branches of these proto-humans. In other words, the Australopithecus probably started to develop into the Homo gaster, and then they developed into two branches of proto-humans, homonyms, you know. But the lighter build like Lucy. And one of the things that changed, you know, was her diet. She became an omnivore.
Ralph,
Yeah.
you accidentally named 2-3.
Oh yeah, I can't count. Thank you. There's number 2.
It's because you
Well, I
wanted
was
to
looking
put
at
three.
Google and I
Yeah.
Omnivore, omnivorous. Okay, there we go. Omnivorous. So the idea that they're becoming, they can eat more things. They're not just chasing after meat. They can eat berries and leaves and fruits and things like that. So they're becoming omnivorous. That's probably a big thing because better nutrition overall. I mean, if you're just chasing after game, you may or may not catch them for a while, maybe several days before you eat. But if you're also going around gathering up berries and nuts and fruits and things like that, you probably have nutrition more often, so you're getting better food supply to your brain and all that kind of stuff. And then tool use. That was kind of a good thing. Bigger brain. Okay. Now, again, we say that well, actually, I wanted to get this later. Yeah, I went too soon. This is number 3. I went too soon. Sorry. Number 3. Let's put the. I wanted to do this one. I want to put this here. This is starting here. This is number 3. Tool use, and we're actually in Homo erectus and stuff like that. Tool use, bigger brain. That's good enough on that part, I think. But the point is, bigger brain. I mean, it's like the bigger computer chip. Presumably more functions. These individuals are able to pass on information from one generation to the next. And by the way, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I hope we have time today. If not, we'll do it next time. Called cultural evolution. And cultural evolution is actually Lamarckian, the way it's transmitted, as opposed to Darwinian. It's kind of interesting. We'll talk about that. It's because it's not organic evolution, it's cultural evolution. We'll come back to that idea. But so the number 3 was tool use, larger brain, and all that. So eventually, what happened is that, oh gosh, what time? About what time? About between roughly 500,000
12 minutes
to 1 million years ago, there were 3 species left. Okay. So we're leading to modern humans. So by, let's say, and again, there's no absolute date here, by 500,000 to 1 million years ago, there were 3 species remaining. Okay. And of these 3 species, then, let me just give you these. Oh, I have it here somewhere. I'll find it in my notes. I'll give it to you. It's around here somewhere. Oh, who knows where I have it? I was just going to give it to you and make it nice and. Oh, here we have it. Oh, that's somewhere it was. Okay, it's going to be right here. 3 species. No, I don't know where I put it.
I have that problem all the time.
Yeah, I know. No, I do have it here too.
No, I do too.
Here we have it. I have it here. 3 species remain. Okay. First one. These are the Neanderthals. These are mainly found, and I'm not saying this is the only place they were, but they're mainly found now.
Right.
When they find skeletons, mainly found in Europe and Western Asia. And then the second population, they were in Africa. And these are very much like us in anatomy and everything.
Homo erectus.
In other words, modern humans, that's what I'm talking about. Like us. And they're called the Middle Stone Age Africans.
Oh, really?
And then the last one, called the last three are in Eastern Asia. And the thing is that these three groups are different from each other. They're similar. They're very similar, but they're distinct populations. And they think that they all, more or less derive from the Homo erectus. So the Homo erectus, they think, basically split into three lineages, but they were closely related. And okay, so this is like 500,000 to a million years ago. So they were all living same time period. Now, something happened. It seems like, yeah, go ahead.
What's the third one called?
Well, they called, what was it called? I don't have a term for them.
The Denisovans.
Just say it again.
Denisovans.
The Denisovans, they are, yeah, I think there's a broader name than that, but there was a group they found in, I think it's Denisova, Russia, and that's what you're talking about. But I think there may be a broader term, but I can't think of what it is offhand. But they found, oh gosh,
Is it in the
trouble
book?
coming up with the names of some of the things, but I don't remember the official name. It's just we'll just call them we'll call them the Asiatic proto-humans or something. I don't know what you want to call them. But here's the deal. So they're all living the same time period. They're all, presumably some intermixing too. But something seems to have happened about 35,000 years ago on the average. There's no absolute. But about 30, and this is what is assumed by various scientists. Okay, so about 35,000 years ago was what one scientist calls the Great Leap Forward. That's a great term. But what they're trying to say is there seems to be some big change, and that big change is in this middle group. And it's that group that then takes over, essentially, and develops into what we call ourselves, modern humans all over the world here. And the other groups died out. I'll give you some dates in just a minute.
Those three groups could interbreed, though, couldn't they?
They could, and apparently they have, because they do think they have Neanderthal. All of us share some amounts of Neanderthal genes. Some percentage. I don't know what they think now, but
Some
anyway.
more than others.
But okay. But so here's this great leap forward, and what they think happened, maybe, and it makes sense. We don't know for sure. Some change in the structure of
Vocal cords?
vocal cords, and maybe change in the brain to allow speech. Because presumably these other animals communicated, but mainly by signs and grunts and noises. I mean, monkeys communicate. There's the vervet monkey has 18 different sounds it makes, and each sound has a specific meaning. One means there's a predator. One means there's a snake around. One means there's food. One means, But suddenly, when you can speak abstract language, we say words, and what's the word like human? Has no necessary meaning except as we all use it. It has meaning, right? Or rock.
Yeah.
Spear.
Whatever it's called at the
meat.
time. Yeah.
Chase.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the point I'm making is abstract language. So what they think it is then, I'll say maybe, because nobody knows, but maybe a change in vocal cords. And maybe the brain was already ready for this. I can't, it probably was actually. It was all ready for speech, because they think speech is built into our brain.
Noam Chomsky
kids,
is,
and they will develop some language with each other, you know,
Yeah.
if they're not given their own language. But anyway,
right.
so they think it was some change in the vocal cords to allow speech, and then suddenly you have this ability then to transmit from generation to generation what you learn in an easy way, like giving lectures. Well, that's what we're doing, aren't we? But anyway, but some easy way to transmit information, and so you know, you can certainly show somebody something, but if you can tell them, say, look, go over and get that stick and whittle it and get a nice sharp edge. Okay, now go get some of these little vines and see if we can't make a
bow.
nice bow and make some arrow. I mean, you know, you can say something. You don't have to just, you know, show every single detail. And okay, you go over that side, I'll go this side. We're going to surround these animals and we'll get them. Anyway, so this allowed rapid transmission of cultural evolution as opposed to organic evolution. And the important thing about this cultural evolution, you know, the usual way we describe it is you don't have to reinvent the wheel each generation. And one generation invents the wheel, the next person makes it a little bit nicer and maybe makes some an axle, you know, and the next person makes something with the anyway, you know.
And then the rest,
this cultural evolution is a transmittal of whatever you have learned. You can hand off to your offspring. And keep in mind that humans, you know, we are young. We keep our young for years and years before we let them out into the big world.
Yeah, they didn't used to.
In the meantime, they've presumably learned a lot. Well, they're supposed to learn a lot anyway, and we hope they did. Yeah, but and this is the big point I was going to make, is that cultural evolution is Lamarckian. That's why I said when I talk about Lamarck, I said we sometimes biologists kind of make fun of Lamarck because his ideas about evolution were wrong, certainly about, you know, organic evolution. But it's true, you know, you're passing on acquired characteristics. The acquired characteristics are what we develop in this generation. We pass it off to the next generation. So Lamarckian the way it works. So it's very fast. Organic evolution is slow. And all you have to do is look at our transportation, how rapidly transportation's changed in a little over a century, how rapidly our ability to communicate across distances has changed in, you know, a little over a century. One last thing before you go, because I know I've got 2 minutes, but I want to tell you something about when these guys last survived. This is sort of scary, actually. It's a little upsetting when you think about it. The Neanderthals were already in Europe. What we now call Homo sapiens, derived from the second group, arrived in Europe about 40,000 years ago, and the Neanderthals died out about 28,000 years ago. So let me write these down. I just want you to
they killed them.
Just a second. It's a little bit upsetting.
Seriously,
so,
they did.
So we'll say these guys came to Europe.
Got them inferior and didn't want to compete with them for food.
And these guys died out. These died out 28,000 years ago. Was it deliberate? I hope not, but I can't say it wasn't.
It seems like it would have been.
It could have been they were out competed, but it could have been that the Homo sapiens who were able to communicate better could make, you know, better groupings. They could you know, presumably wipe them out.
Better pattern recognition stuff.
In Asia, they died out about 40,000 years ago. These guys died out about 40,000 years ago.
Could they have just interbred and just become?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Could they have just interbred and become the same species?
Possibly, but probably there would be more in their genes than there are. So it's more likely that they died. I'd like to say a little more about, not now, but we don't have time, but say a little bit more about Neanderthals next time. We make fun of Neanderthals. I don't think we should. But anyway, these guys died out about 40,000 years ago. And these guys came in about 46,000 years ago. So it sort of looks like that Homo sapiens were a little rough on their first relatives. I hate to say it, but it does look that way.
Well, that is Darwinism, right?
Well, yeah,
For breeding.
but I would think that we have more of their genes. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's the
That's
DNA.
why I think it was some interbreeding, yes, and some, but it could have been just out competing. I'm not saying they actually went out and killed them, but I think it could have.